Hello and welcome once again to the Death Row and Executions channel. I'm Paco Rivera. Before we get into the next scheduled execution, here's some Death Row news for you. You've probably heard about this case. There's been a lot of media attention about it and other various programs on it in the past few years. Last month, the state of Idaho announced that they will be seeking the death penalty for Lori Vallow if she is convicted of first-degree murder for the deaths of her two children, Tylee and JJ. The children were last seen in September of 2019, and for months, Lori Vallow had said that the children were okay, but she refused to disclose their location. In the meantime, Lori Vallow got married to a man named Chad Daybell, whose wife had recently died, with authorities at first stating that the woman had died from natural causes. In June of 2020, during a search of Chad Daybell's property, the bodies of both children, Tylee and JJ, were found buried there. Now, both Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell have been charged with the murder of the two children, and the death of Chad Daybell's wife is also now being considered as a homicide. Both Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell may be facing death penalties. That trial is expected to begin in January of next year. The next scheduled execution to take place is very interesting because if this guy had not opened his mouth, he might never have ended up on death row. His name is Ramiro Felix Gonzales, and he is scheduled to be executed in Texas on July 13. In the year 2002, when Gonzales was 19 years old, he was found guilty of kidnapping and rape of a real estate agent near San Antonio. Sometime in 2003, as he was set to begin 2 life sentences for that crime, for some reason, Gonzales, out of the blue, approached an officer and told him that he had information about a woman that was killed about 2 years before and that he could show authorities where the body is buried. Fortunately, Gonzales did the right thing by coming forward about that. Bear in mind now, at this point, he's not saying he killed someone 2 years before. He's only saying that he knows about the death of a woman and where her body is buried. The woman Gonzales was talking about was 18-year-old Bridget Townsend. Bridget was still regarded as a missing person, and detectives had no leads on what happened to her. Ramiro Gonzales led investigators to a remote hillside near the ranch home where he lived with his family. During the walk to that hillside, Ramiro Gonzales told those around him about jewelry that Bridget Townsend was wearing and gave detailed descriptions of that jewelry. At this point, it would seem that Gonzales wanted there to be no doubt that he was there, he was present when Bridget was buried. Sure enough, authorities found a skull and the skeletal remains of Bridget Townsend right where Gonzales told them it would be. And some of the jewelry that Gonzales had described was also found. Now here's where things start getting weird. You would think that after confessing all that, after telling authorities about the murder of that young woman, he would continue telling the truth about what happened that day. Instead, Gonzales gave at least 3 different stories. During the drive away from where Bridget was buried, Gonzales first said that the Mexican mafia had killed her, and he allowed them to use that location near his home to bury the body, doing the Mexican mafia a favor. He later said that he was present when others killed Bridget at that location, but he had nothing to do with it other than witnessing the crime. He later said that he was hired by Bridget's boyfriend to kill her. And in a later version, Gonzales said that Bridget's boyfriend was not involved and that he had killed the woman on his own. We can only really have an idea of what truly happened from the final statement provided by Ramiro Gonzales. Given his tendency to change stories, we might never know the exact details of what occurred that day. In his statement, Gonzalez said that Bridget Townsend's boyfriend, Joe Leal, was his drug dealer. Sometime in January of 2001, he had called Joe Leal's house because he wanted to buy drugs. Bridget Townsend answered the phone and told him that her boyfriend was at work. Realizing that Bridget was home alone, he drove to the house with the intent of stealing cocaine. When Bridget Townsend opened the door, Gonzalez walked past her to the bedroom closet where he knew that Joe Leal kept the drugs. He found some cash and put that in his pocket. When Bridget saw what he was doing, she picked up the phone to call her boyfriend. But Ramiro attacked her and dragged her into the bedroom. He tied her hands and feet and later placed her in his pickup truck. Gonzalez then drove to the ranch where he lived with his family and retrieved a high-powered .243 caliber deer rifle that belonged to his grandfather. Gonzalez stated that he intended to kill Bridget Townsend to eliminate her as a witness to what he had done at Joe Leal's house. He untied Townsend and walked her toward the brushy hillside. As he was loading the rifle, Bridget Townsend began crying and asking for her mother. He said that she offered him money, drugs, or sex if he would let her live. He then pretended to agree and unloaded the rifle in her presence. He said they then went back to his truck and had sex. After she got dressed, however, he reloaded the rifle again and then walked her back into the brushy area again and shot her. He then drove home. When he got back to the house, he removed the empty shell casing from the rifle and threw it away. He put the rifle back where it was and then interacted with his family as though nothing had happened. The question one must ask is this: why did Ramiro Gonzalez decide to talk about Bridget Townsend in the first place? Maybe he found himself in a situation where he was going to spend the rest of his life in prison, and did he think that by disclosing information about a crime 2 years before, he might get special treatment? He was only 19 years old when he approached authorities about the death of Bridget Townsend. He had dropped out of school as a child after the 7th grade. His brain might have still been somewhat messed up from all the drugs he took. If he thought that 2 life terms was going to change to something more convenient for him by talking about a crime that had occurred 2 years earlier, then he wasn't very bright at all. If that's what he was thinking, he badly miscalculated. As a result, the matter ended up getting him convicted and being put on death row. Ramiro Gonzalez has spent about 15 years on death row now. He now says that confessing was the right thing to do, and he did it for the victim's mother, who was tormented not knowing what happened to her missing daughter. He has also said that he does not want to spend the rest of his life in prison and looks forward to being put to death.
I have no qualms about dying. It doesn't matter to me. It's just my way out of prison. An individual had told me about the mother, and it impacted me really, really bad. And I believe that she deserved to know.
If you would like to see more of these death row stories, go ahead and subscribe so that you are alerted when the next one comes out. I'm Paco Rivera. Bye for now.